60 floors above Manhattan, Blythe had learned that to the elite, she wasn't a person, but a caffeine vending machine in a black uniform. As she poured $10 lattes for men who made millions in a blink, her mind was busy calculating how many pennies stood between her and eviction. She believed poverty was her greatest threat, and invisibility her only function. She was wrong. In a few minutes, the elevator doors would slide open to deliver violence, and she would commit the insanity of using her body, fragile, mortal, and exhausted, as a human shield to protect the only being in that skyscraper who was ironically immortal. The marble floor of the penthouse coffee shop gleamed like frozen water beneath the January morning light. I pressed my palm against the espresso machine, letting the heat seep through my skin. The only warmth in this temple of glass and steel perched 60 floors above Manhattan. My reflection stared back from the polished chrome, dark circles under grey eyes, hair twisted into a bun that had seen better days. The black apron hiding the fact that my shirt had a frayed collar I'd sewn twice already. The hiss of steam, the bitter scent of burnt Arabica, the whisper of cashmere against leather as the morning's elite filtered through. I didn't belong here. My fingers trembled as I wiped down the counter, not from cold, though the air conditioning kept the space at a crisp 68 degrees. The eviction notice folded in my back pocket, crinkled with each movement. 14 days. The words had been printed in a font that seemed designed to communicate finality. Double espresso, no sugar. The voice cut through my spiral, like a blade through silk. I looked up. He stood at the counter with the stillness of a predator that had never known hunger. Tall, well over 6 feet, with the kind of bone structure that belonged in Renaissance paintings. Dark hair swept back from a face too symmetrical to be entirely human. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch. Pale grey, almost colourless, holding the weight of something ancient and utterly patient. Stellan Mercer. I'd seen his face in the financial section of discarded newspapers. Venture capitalist, billionaire, the kind of man who moved markets with a phone call. Of course, my voice came out steadier than I felt. His suit probably cost more than my annual tuition. Charcoal wool, cut so precisely, it seemed to bend light around the edges. No tie, the top button of his white shirt undone, in a way that suggested he'd never cared about rules designed for lesser men. I pulled the shot, watching the espresso stream into the cup like liquid amber. My hands didn't shake. Years of practice, working through exhaustion, through fear, through the bone-deep certainty that I was one disaster away from losing everything. He didn't look at his phone, didn't glance around the shop. His attention settled on me, with the focus of a microscope isolating a single cell. You're new, not a question. 3 weeks. I set the cup on the counter between us. That'll be. Put it on my account. Of course he had an account. Men like him didn't carry cash, didn't wait in lines, didn't acknowledge the machinery of commerce that kept the world turning. He lifted the cup. His fingers were long, elegant, and absolutely steady. No wedding ring, no watch, which seemed strange for someone whose time was presumably worth thousands per minute. You're a student. Again, not a question. His gaze flicked to the textbook I'd shoved under the counter. Organic chemistry. Spine cracked from too many late-night cramming sessions. Pre-med, Columbia. The words tasted like ash. I'd deferred twice already. The loans were suffocating me. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but a recognition of some private irony. Ambitious, desperate. I corrected, before I could stop myself. The corner of his mouth moved, a fraction of an inch. It transformed his face from merely beautiful to something that made my pulse stutter. Honesty. He took a sip of the espresso, his eyes never leaving mine. Rare in this city. The door chimed, more customers filtering in, the morning rush beginning. But he didn't move, didn't step aside to let others approach. He stood there, drinking his coffee, with the unhurried certainty of someone who had never been rushed in his life. Your name, Blythe. I reached for the next order ticket, needing something to do with my hands. Blythe. Holloway. Stellan Mercer. He extended his hand across the counter. His palm was cool against mine. Not cold, just absent of the warmth I expected. The handshake lasted exactly 3 seconds, firm without being aggressive. When he released me, my skin tingled where we touched. I'll see you tomorrow, Blythe. Holloway. He turned and walked toward a table by the window. The best seat in the house, naturally. Sat down with a newspaper he produced from somewhere, crossing one leg over the other, with geometric precision. I forced myself to focus on the next customer, or then, the next. But my awareness kept drifting back to him like a compass finding north. He read for exactly 43 minutes, didn't order anything else, didn't make calls or check email, just sat there perfectly still, as if he had all the time in the world. When he finally stood to leave, his eyes found mine across the crowded shop. He nodded, once, a gesture that felt like a promise or a threat, I couldn't tell which. The door closed behind him. The temperature seemed to rise 5 degrees. He came back the next day, same time, same order, same table, and the day after that. By the end of the week, I had his espresso ready before he reached the counter. He'd appear at exactly 8:47 a.m., moving through the morning crowd like smoke through a screen door. No one seemed to notice him, though he was impossible to miss. You're predictable, I said on the 5th morning, sliding the cup across marble. Consistency is undervalued. He handed me his card, black metal, heavier than it should be. Most people mistake it for monotony, and you don't care what people mistake. That almost smile again. I stopped caring about human opinion sometime around the fall of Constantinople. I laughed before I could stop myself. That's very dramatic. Is it? His head tilted fractionally. You should smile more often. It changes your face. Heat crept up my neck. I turned away, busying myself with the milk steamer. Behind me, his voice dropped lower. You're afraid. My hands froze. Excuse me, not of me, of something else. You carry it in your shoulders. Or pause. Debt. I spun around. That's none of your. How much? The question hung between us like a blade. The morning noise faded. Or maybe my hearing just narrowed to the space between his words and my heartbeat. Why would you possibly care? He studied me with those colorless eyes. Call it curiosity. How much to make it disappear? My throat closed. 83,000. Give or take. He didn't blink, didn't react at all. The number that had been crushing me for 3 years meant nothing to him. That's all. Rage flared hot in my chest. Must be nice. Living in a world where that's nothing. It is. No apology in his voice. Just fact. But I wasn't always there. Before I could respond, the door burst open. The man who entered moved wrong. Too fast. Too focused. His hand was already inside his jacket, and I saw the gun before my brain could process what it meant. Nobody fucking move. The world slowed down, crystallized. I saw Stellan's eyes widen fractionally, the first real emotion I'd witnessed on his face. Saw him start to rise from his chair. Saw the gunman's arms swing toward him, toward the obvious wealth, the obvious target. My body moved before my mind caught up. I threw myself across the counter, stumbling between them as the gun's barrel found its mark. The metal pressed cold against my sternum. Through my thin shirt I felt it like ice against my heart. Don't. My voice came from somewhere outside myself. Please don't. Behind me, Stellan had gone absolutely still. I felt his presence like a change in air pressure, vast, ancient, and suddenly very, very dangerous. The gunman's eyes were wild, desperate. I knew that look. I'd seen it in my mirror. Please, I whispered again. Then Stellan spoke, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Freeze. The word wasn't loud, wasn't shouted, but it carried weight that made my bones ache. The gunman's finger, already tightening on the trigger, simply stopped. Everything stopped. Everything stopped. The gunman's body locked mid-motion, finger frozen on the trigger. His eyes were still wild, still desperate, but his muscles had turned to stone. Only his chest moved. Shallow, panicked breaths that fogged in air that had gone arctic. I stood there, pressed against the counter, the gun barrel still kissing my sternum through my shirt, my heart hammered against it. The metal was warming now, heated by my skin, but the air around us had turned to winter. Step back, Blythe. Stellan's voice came from behind me, soft, almost gentle, but underneath ran something vast and cold as a glacier. I felt it in my teeth, in the hollow of my throat. I didn't move, couldn't. My legs had forgotten how. Now, the word pulled at something deep in my spine. My body obeyed before my mind could protest, stumbling backward until I collided with solid warmth. Stellan's hand caught my elbow, steadying me. His palm burned against my skin, the only heat left in the room. The gunman still hadn't moved. His eyes tracked me, wide and glassy, but the rest of him remained perfectly, impossibly still. A statue, mid-robbery. Sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the cold. What did you do? Hold. My voice came out thin, breathless. Saved your life. Stellan's grip on my elbow tightened fractionally. You shouldn't have done that. Done what? Protected me. The absurdity of it hit me then. I'd thrown myself between a gun and a man who could apparently freeze people with a word. A laugh bubbled up in my chest, sharp and slightly hysterical. He was going to shoot you. He couldn't have. Stellan moved past me, circling the frozen gunman like a wolf, studying prey. His shoes made no sound on the linoleum. But you didn't know that. I watched him examine the man from every angle. Clinical, detached, the way I'd seen him study the restaurant's wine list. The gunman's eyes followed him, the only part still capable of movement, and in them I saw pure terror. What are you going to do to him? Nothing permanent. Stellan stopped in front of the man, tilted his head. He's desperate, probably has a family. Medical bills, if I had to guess. He reached out, plucked the gun from the frozen fingers with casual ease. Am I right? The gunman's jaw worked. Nothing came out but a strangled sound. I'll take that as yes. Stellan ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber with practiced efficiency. The bullet clinked as it hit the floor. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk out of here. You're going to go home. Tomorrow, you'll find an envelope in your mailbox with enough to cover whatever drove you to this. T leaned closer. But if I ever see you again, if you ever think about doing something this stupid again, I will find you, and freezing will be the kindest thing I do. Understood? A tiny nod, barely perceptible. Good. Stellan stepped back. Go. The gunman's body unlocked, like a marionette with cut strings. He stumbled, nearly fell, caught himself against the doorframe. His eyes found mine for a split second. Gratitude and terror mixing into something I couldn't name. Then he was gone. Running footsteps echoed down the street. Silence flooded back in. The normal sounds of the city filtered through the open door. Car horns, distant sirens, someone's music thumping bass notes into the night. I stared at the empty doorway, at the bullet on the floor, at Stellan, who'd already returned to his table and was calmly finishing his coffee as if nothing had happened. You're not human. The words fell out before I could stop them. Flat. Certain. Stellan set down his cup, met my eyes. No. What are you? Old. A pause. Very old. My knees decided they were done. I grabbed the counter, lowered myself onto the stool behind the register. The vinyl was cracked, leaking yellow foam, And I focused on that, instead of the impossible thing sitting at table 7. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting tonight. He stood, pulled out his wallet. This time he left $500 bills on the table. That's for the coffee and the trauma, and to close early. I can't. You can. He moved toward the door, stopped, turned back. You saved my life tonight, Blythe Halloway. Whether I needed saving or not, you didn't hesitate. That creates a debt. Hi, I don't want your money. I know. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or respect. Which is why you'll get something better, or my protection, for as long as you need it. I don't need. Yes, you do. His eyes held mine, grey as winter dawn. You just put yourself between a desperate man and his target, or word will spread. People will wonder who you are, why you matter, or whether you're worth using as leverage. Cold slithered down my spine. That's insane. Nobody cares about me. I do. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning I couldn't pass. Lock the door behind me. Go home. Tomorrow, we'll talk about what happens next. He was gone before I could respond. The door swung shut, its bell chiming cheerfully, and I was alone with the smell of burnt coffee and the bullet still gleaming on the floor. I didn't sleep. How could I? And every time I closed my eyes, I saw the gun, felt the metal against my chest, heard Stellan's voice, dropping the temperature like a stone through ice. An asterisk, freeze, asterisk. What kind of person could do that? What kind of thing? I sat on my apartment's fire escape, watching dawn paint the sky in shades of rust and gold. The city woke up around me. Garbage trucks, early commuters, the bodega on the corner rolling up its security gate. Normal. Everything was so beautifully, brutally normal. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Asterisk. A car will pick you up at noon. We need to talk. Minus a asterisk. I stared at the message, deleted it. It reappeared immediately. Asterisk. Please. Asterisk. Asterisk. That single word decided me. Not the command. Not the assumption that I'd obey. But the please. Small and unexpected. From a man who could freeze people with his voice. I typed back asterisk. Where? Asterisk. Asterisk. Somewhere safe. Mine. 9. The car was a Mercedes. Black, sleek, and so clean. It looked like it had never touched actual road. The driver wore a suit that probably cost more than my rent, and didn't speak as he opened the door. I climbed in, because I was an idiot. Because curiosity had always been my fatal flaw. Because some part of me needed to know what Stellan Mercer really was. The interior smelled like leather and something else. Something crisp and cold that reminded me of winter mornings, of frost on windows. We drove through the city, leaving my neighborhood's comfortable grime behind for streets that got progressively cleaner, wider, more expensive. We stopped in front of a building that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of black glass. It caught the noon sun and threw it back in sharp, cutting angles. Mr. Mercer is expecting you. The driver's first words. Penthouse level. The elevator was all mirrors and soft lighting. I watched my reflection multiply into infinity as we rose. 40 floors. 50. 60. My stomach dropped with each number. The doors opened directly into an apartment. No, not an apartment. A space. All floor-to-ceiling windows and polished concrete and furniture that looked like modern art. The city spread out below like a map, and I felt suddenly, viscerally aware of how high up I was, how far there was to fall. You came. Stellan stood by the windows, backlit by the city. He'd changed clothes, dark slacks, white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, casual wealth, the kind of effortless style that came from never having to think about money. You said please. I stayed by the elevator. What am I doing here? Learning the truth. He gestured to a chair. Low slung, probably Danish, definitely uncomfortable. Sit. I'll stand. A smile ghosted across his face. Of course you will. He moved to a bar cart, poured 2 glasses of something amber, brought one to me. I didn't take it. I'm not human, he said, as if commenting on the weather. I haven't been for a very long time. How long? 540 years, give or take a decade. The number was too big, too impossible. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Right, and I'm the Queen of England. You're not. He sipped his drink. Whore. I am what you're thinking. What your rational mind is screaming. Can't be real. Say it. Vampire. The word landed between us like a stone. I waited for the punchline, for the hidden cameras, for anything that would make this make sense. Prove it. Stellan set down his glass, crossed the space between us in a movement too fast to track. One moment he was by the bar, the next he was inches away, and I could see his eyes had changed. The grey had bled to silver, metallic, inhuman. Is this proof enough? His hand came up, and I flinched, but he only touched my wrist, gentle, his thumb finding my pulse point. His skin was cool, not cold, but cooler than it should be, and when I looked down, I saw his fingers had gone pale as marble. Your heart is racing, he murmured. I can hear it. Smell the adrenaline in your blood. Feel the heat of you. He stepped back, and his eyes faded to grey again. That's what you are to me, Blythe. A symphony of life, warmth in a cold world. I stumbled backward until I hit the window. The glass was cold against my spine. Solid. Real. This is insane. Yes, vampires aren't real. And yet, he spread his hands. Here I am. My brain spun, trying to find purchase. The gunman, you froze him. Compulsion. A parlor trick, relatively speaking. Useful for avoiding complications. Why didn't you just... I stopped, swallowed. Why didn't you kill him? Because you were watching. Stellan's voice went soft, and I didn't want you to see me as a monster. Too late. Perhaps. He returned to the windows, stared out at the city. But you're still here, still listening. That counts for something. I should have run, should have called the police, a priest, a psychiatric ward. Instead, I heard myself ask, why am I here? Because you saved me last night. You said you didn't need saving. I didn't, but you didn't know that. You saw danger and stepped between it and a stranger. Do you have any idea how rare that is? He turned, and something in his expression made my breath catch. In 5 centuries, I've seen humanity at its worst, its most selfish, most cruel. And then you, a girl drowning in debt, working herself to exhaustion. You risk your life for someone you barely know. So what? You want to reward me. I want to keep you safe. The words came out fierce, possessive. There are others like me. Not all of them have my restraint. Or word is already spreading about the human who protected the Mercer heir. They'll come looking, to test you, use you, hurt you to get to me. Fear spiked cold in my gut. Then tell them I don't matter. Tell them it was nothing. I can't. He crossed to me again, slower this time, giving me space to run if I wanted, because it wasn't nothing, and they'll know I'm lying. Why? Because I've never protected a human before. His hand came up, hesitated an inch from my face, because I've never wanted to. The air between us went tight, charged. It could feel the cold radiating off him, mixing with my heat, creating something electric. This is crazy, I whispered. Yes, I should leave. You should. Neither of us moved. His phone shattered the moment, sharp, insistent. Stellan's jaw tightened as he answered. What? A pause. His expression went carefully blank. When? Another pause. I see. No. Keep her there. I'm coming. He hung up, met my eyes. You need to stay here. What? No, I have work. Not anymore. He was already moving. grabbing a jacket. But it was my security team. Someone broke into your apartment an hour ago, tore it apart. They're looking for you. Blythe. The floor tilted under me. Whore. I don't know yet. But until I do, you're not safe out there. He stopped at the elevator, hand on the button. This penthouse is warded, protected. Nothing can get in without my permission. You'll be safe here. You're locking me in. I'm keeping you alive. The elevator doors opened. There's food in the kitchen, clothes in the guest room, everything you need. I'll be back before dark. Stellan, please, that word again. Desperate now. Just trust me. For now. The doors closed on his face, and I was alone in a glass cage, 60 stories above the city, with a vampire's promise of protection that felt more like imprisonment. The worried to the windows, pressed my palms against the glass. Below, the city moved and breathed and lived, and I was trapped in a tower with a monster who looked at me like I was something precious, something worth keeping. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, not Stellan's. Asterisk. We know where you are. We know what you mean to him. Tell the Mercer Prince that Valarius Cade sends his regards. The phone slipped from my fingers, clattered on the concrete floor. Outside, the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, and I realized, with creeping horror, that I was about to spend my first night in a vampire's lair. The phone lay on the floor between my feet, screen still glowing with Valarius Cade's message. My hands had gone numb. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawled below like a circuit board, millions of lights beginning to flicker on as dusk approached. I picked up the phone with shaking fingers. Read the message again. Asterisk. We know where you are. The penthouse suddenly felt less like a sanctuary and more like a fishbowl. All this glass, all this exposure. I stepped back from the windows, pulse hammering against my throat. My phone rang. Stellan, don't answer any calls or texts from numbers you don't recognize, he said before I could speak. His voice was tight, controlled, and stay away from the windows. Too late. I moved toward the interior of the penthouse, toward the kitchen, with its solid walls. Valarius Cade just sent me his regards. Silence. Then what did he say exactly? I read him the message, heard something crack on his end, wood splintering under pressure. I'm coming back. 20 minutes. The sun. I'll manage. The line went dead. I paced the kitchen, arms wrapped around myself. The marble countertops gleamed under recessed lighting. Everything here was beautiful and cold and perfect. Like him. Like the life he'd built over 5 centuries of careful control. 15 minutes later, the elevator chimed. Stellan emerged, and I barely recognized him. His face was flushed, almost human-looking, but his eyes were pure predator. He'd fed recently, fed heavily. You're safe, he said. It sounded like he was trying to convince himself. He crossed to me in 3 strides, hands hovering near my shoulders, but not quite touching. You're safe here. He knows where I am. He's posturing. This building has wards that took me a decade to establish. He can't get in, but his jaw was tight. He's trying to draw me out, make me act rashly. So what do? His eyes met mine, something shifting in their depths. This isn't your fight, Blythe. He made it my fight when he sent that text. I moved past him to the windows, looking out at the darkening city. You said you've been gathering information on him, evidence, for years. Then use it. You said there's a council. Call them, make this official. He was quiet for a long moment. If I do that, everything becomes public. My interest in you, the fact that he threatened you to get to me, it puts an even bigger target on your back. The target's already there. I turned to face him. At least this way we control the narrative. Something like admiration flickered across his features. You're not afraid. I'm terrified. My voice was steady, despite the tremor in my hands. But I'm tired of running. Tired of being the thing that happens to. I want to be the one who acts. He moved closer, and the air between us charged with that electric tension I'd felt since the night we met. Unveiling, Theatre District, a building that doesn't officially exist. If we do this, there's no going back. They'll all know about you, about us. Is there an us? His hand finally made contact, fingers brushing my cheek with impossible gentleness. There's been an us since you looked at me in that cafe and saw something worth knowing instead of something to fear. The confession hung between us, fragile and fierce. Then let's make sure Valarius Cade understands exactly what that means. Minor. All the council chambers occupied the gutted remains of a 1920s movie palace. Stellan led me through a side entrance, down corridors lined with peeling Art Deco wallpaper, and the ghost smell of old velvet. My heels clicked against cracked marble. He'd insisted I dress for this. A simple black dress from the guest room closet that fit like it had been made for me. Probably had been. Stay close, he murmured, as we approached massive double doors. Don't speak unless directly addressed. And whatever happens, don't show fear, or they can smell it. The doors opened onto a circular chamber that still held echoes of its former grandeur. Tiered seating rose in a semicircle around a central floor. 12 figures occupied the seats, some in modern suits, others in clothing that belonged to different centuries. All of them turned to watch us enter. Valarius Cade stood in the center of the floor, looking like he'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Tall, dark-haired, with the kind of sharp beauty that made you think of knives. His smile was all confidence. Stellan Mercer, how kind of you to accept my invitation. I called this council, Stellan said evenly. Not you, did you? Cade's eyes slid to me. Or did your new pet convince you to finally stop hiding behind your corporate empire and face me directly? I felt Stellan tense beside me, felt the predator in him rising to the surface. Her name, Stellan said, voice dropping to something dangerous, is Blythe Halloway, and she's under my protection. Protection. Cade laughed. Is that what we're calling it? I call it obsession. 500 years of isolation. And suddenly you're following a human girl around like a lovesick puppy. It's embarrassing. One of the council members, a woman in Victorian dress, leaned forward. Valarius Cade, you stand accused of threatening a human under formal protection. How do you answer? I sent a text message. Hardly a capital offense. You broke into her apartment, Stellan said, destroyed her belongings, terrorized her. Prove it. This was the moment. I stepped forward, pulling the folder from my bag, the one I'd spent the previous week organizing, cross-referencing every piece of information Stellan had gathered, every transaction, every disappearance, every carefully buried secret. Blythe, Stellan started. He wants proof. I walked toward the center of the floor, toward Cade. My heart was trying to escape my chest, but I kept my spine straight. Here's proof. Financial records showing Valarius Cade has been embezzling from the council's shared resources for 30 years. Security footage of him feeding on humans in violation of the Accords. Testimony from 6 different vampires he's blackmailed into silence. I handed the folder to the Victorian woman. She opened it, eyes widening. Cade's smile finally faltered. That's fabricated. All of it. The metadata is authentic, Stellan said quietly. I made sure of it. Every document is verified. Every witness is credible. You've been breaking our laws for decades, Valarius. I just needed a reason to make it public. And threatening her gave you that reason. Understanding dawned on Cade's face. You used her as bait. Stellan moved to stand beside me. You made the mistake of thinking she was a weakness. She's not. She's the reason I finally stopped playing your games and ended this. The chamber erupted in whispers. The council members passed the folder between them, faces growing darker with each page. Gain's composure cracked. He moved with vampire speed, closing the distance between us in a blink. But Stellan was faster. He caught Cade's wrist mid-strike, twisted, and sent him sprawling across the marble floor. "You're done," Stellan said. "The council will strip your territories, your resources, your protection. And if you ever come near her again," his voice dropped to something inhuman, "I'll forget every law we've ever made, and remind you why they used to call me the Winter King." The Victorian woman stood. "Valerius Cade, you are hereby stripped of council membership and placed under sanction. You have 72 hours to vacate your territories." Cade rose slowly, straightening his jacket. His eyes found mine, and for a moment I saw something ancient and furious looking back. Then he smiled, thin and bitter. "Enjoy your little romance," he said. "But remember, Stellan, humans are fragile, temporary. In 50 years, she'll be dust, and you'll still be here, alone, wondering if it was worth it." He walked out, and the doors closed behind him with a hollow boom. The penthouse was silent when we returned. Stellan moved to the bar, poured himself something amber. His hands were steady, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "You shouldn't have stepped forward like that," he said finally. "He could have killed you before I reached you, but he didn't." I kicked off my heels, felt the cool concrete under my feet, and now he's finished. For now, he downed the drink. He was right about one thing. Humans are fragile. Is that what's been stopping you? I moved closer. The expiration date. He turned to face me. "Socians Evar. I've watched everyone I've ever cared about grow old and die. Watched the world change and change again while I stayed the same. I promised myself I wouldn't do that again. Wouldn't let myself want something I couldn't keep. But you want me anyway." "Yes." The word came out raw. "God help me. Yes." I closed the distance between us, reached up to touch his face, feeling the coolness of his skin, the sharp line of his jaw, then stop thinking about the ending and just be here, now, with me. His control finally shattered. He kissed me like I was oxygen, and he'd been drowning, hands tangling in my hair, pulling me closer. I tasted desperation and longing, and 500 years of loneliness, finally breaking open. When we pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. His eyes had gone dark, pupils blown wide. "I need to feed," he whispered against my lips. "Properly, hard. The blood I took earlier isn't enough, not with how much energy I just expended. Then feed, Blythe. I trust you." And I did, completely, impossibly. He carried me to the bedroom, laid me down on sheets that smelled like cedar and snow. His mouth found my throat, and I felt the sharp pressure of fangs. A moment of pain, then euphoria, connection. Like every nerve in my body had suddenly woken up and started singing. I felt his relief, his hunger, his overwhelming need to protect me. Felt myself reflected back through his senses. Precious, wanted, cherished. When he pulled away, his eyes were clearer, more human. He licked the wound closed, pressed a kiss to the healing skin. "You're going to ruin me," he murmured. "Good," I said, and pulled him down beside me. We lay there in the darkness, my head on his chest, listening to the city breathe 60 stories below. His fingers traced patterns on my shoulder, gentle, reverent, like he was memorizing the feel of me. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now." His voice was soft. "Now we figure it out. Together." Outside, the city glittered like scattered diamonds, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the dark.